All right, guys, so today I'm going to talk about a topic that is so important to me and that is so pervasive, especially in the US, that when I started my addiction and recovery blog, I considered devoting my entire online presence to this issue. So the topic that I'm talking about is rehab fraud and abuse. And again, it is so widespread in the United States, particularly because our for profit system creates a lot of fodder for it that isn't there in nationalized healthcare systems, for example. So I'm going to talk about the Florida Shuffle and body brokering. I'm going to show you examples of two situations with screenshots from a body broker talking to addicts who are waiting to ship out to different treatment centers. But before I get into all of that, I want to share with you an article from the Department of Justice about the prosecution of two men who ran two recovery centers in South Florida. Now, their names are Jonathan and Daniel Markovich. They're brothers, and they were convicted of unlawfully billing for approximately $112 million of addiction treatment services through two facilities. The first was Second Chance Detox, doing business as Compass Detox, and the second was War Network, a related outpatient treatment program. Now, they were also convicted of PPP fraud because these loan applications stated that that their facilities were not engaged in illegal conduct when clearly they were. I'm going to read you word for word what the DOJ had to say about their activities, okay? Now it says, the evidence showed that defendants obtained patients through patient recruiters who offered illegal kickbacks to patients, such as free airline tickets, illegal drugs, and cash payments. The defendants then shuffled a core group of patients between Compass Detox and War to fraudulently bill for as much as possible. Patient recruiters gave patients illegal drugs prior to admission to Compass Detox to ensure admittance for detox, which was the most expensive kind of treatment offered by the defendant's facilities. Therapy sessions were billed for but not routinely provided or attended, and excessive medically unnecessary urinalysis drug tests were ordered. Compass Detox patients were given a so-called comfort drink to sedate them and to keep them coming back. Patients were also given large and potentially harmful amounts of controlled substances in addition to the so-called comfort drink to keep them compliant and docile and to ensure that they stayed at the facility. Certain patients were also routinely readmitted and repeatedly cycled through Compass Detox and War to maximize revenue. That last part about repeatedly cycling through detox, residential, and halfway houses, sober living facilities, that was the Florida Shuffle. So during the late 2000s and early to mid 2010s, there was this boom of pretty bougie for-profit treatment centers in Florida, especially South Florida. There's an area in sort of the Palm Beach area called Delray Beach where I went to treatment, and I'm going to talk more about that later, but we called Delray Beach during this time the recovery mecca of the US and the relapse mecca of the universe. And it was unbelievable. I mean, thousands upon thousands of young addicts got caught up in the cycle where they were given plane tickets to fly in from out of state, usually because they were still on their parents' insurance, which was good private insurance. They would go through inpatient detox. They would go through residential treatment for a month to 2 months. They would get out and start doing outpatient treatment while they were staying in a halfway house or another type of sober living facility. And if they were struggling, or even if they weren't sometimes, they would be offered cash and drugs to relapse so that they could then start the whole cycle over and the facilities could continue this charade of useless treatment, often for years on end. I mean, this was a mode of life. The Florida Shuffle was a way that addicts survived, and that the people at the top of this healthcare chain made, I'm talking like tens of millions of dollars during the time when the U.S. opioid crisis was at its greatest sort of period of expansion. So again, the late 2000s and early to mid 2010s. So as I just mentioned, I was caught up in this for a pretty short while in my case. If you haven't watched my content before, thank you for tuning in. My name is Brian. I am a science teacher. I run an addiction and recovery blog called the Concrete Confessional Blog. I would like to think I'm a writer on a good day, and I am a benzo and opioid addict who has been on and off those substances for 20 years now. I'm currently in the final stage of tapering off of methadone maintenance. So if you haven't seen my content before, thank you for joining us. And again, talking about these issues today, partly because I lived through them. So I went, after I had gone through a couple of treatment facilities in my hometown, after I took a break from medical school, I contacted some treatment providers in Florida that were covered by my parents' insurance, which is really strong insurance. And one of them was called Palm Partners, and it told the representative, who I later learned was a body broker, so not directly affiliated with the facility, and I'll explain more about that in a minute. But body broker told me what a good facility it was, how much they were focused on the mind-body connection and eating healthily and allowing time for exercise, which really appealed to me as a distance runner. Like, it was almost like they were able to read me so well and promised me the things that I cared about. Now, for a lot of other addicts, they were telling them, we have the best detox around. You're not going to feel any pain. You're going to come here. They'll give you a Xanax bar right away. They're going to give you high doses of methadone, and we'll keep you in detox for 10, 14 days if we need to. We're not going to let you feel a single bit of pain, you know? So these body brokers, the good ones, get really astute. You know, drug addicts in general, we're good liars because we have to be to protect our use and to fund and sort of continue our addictions long term. And so we make, in many cases, really good sales reps. And that's essentially what these body brokers are, is shady sales reps for these treatment facilities. So I ended up at a facility called Palm Partners, and for the record, I had a really good experience there. There was some pretty solid core addiction treatment in the typical modalities like cognitive behavioral and dialectical behavioral treatment, but there was also some really cool alternative stuff like sweat lodges and Kundalini yoga, and there was a lot of eating well, going out and playing beach volleyball, and a lot of healthy socialization. So the healthy socialization part got out of hand. Again, this is mostly young addicts, maybe late teens to late 20s, who are, you know, a lot of them were really good-looking guys and gals. And so I swear to God, like a third of every day at Palm Partners was just process groups about who got caught having sex in the previous like 2 days or weekend or whatever. So the no fraternization, what we call 13th stepping rule was a huge, a lot of people got caught up in that. And because of that, we came up with a slogan for the facility that we said at the start of all our patient meetings, where we wanted to encourage self-abuse, as the old timers called it, instead of fraternization. And so we'd say thank you to Palm Partners, where your palm is your partner and your finger is your best friend. So that bit of crudeness aside, I got a message from some federal agency a few years after our discharge from Palm Partners telling me that my anonymity was being protected, but that my medical records had been subpoenaed as part of federal investigation. Now, it turned out Palm Partners was shut down. They're not allowed to provide addiction treatment services anymore. And they only do, I think, weight loss control now, that kind of thing, because they were banned from ever doing addiction treatment again. And I kind of knew what it was going to be even before I looked into it. So it's that one of the things mentioned, unnecessary urinalysis tests, that was mentioned in that Department of Justice bulletin that I just read to you. So this was a facility, it was an inpatient facility that was locked down. Now, it was a really nice setup, but we weren't free to go. We didn't get any day passes. So pretty much, you know, there shouldn't have been any drugs coming in or out of the facility. And to my knowledge, there really weren't. So it was very unusual that every patient every day had to do a full urinalysis panel there. And when I finally started getting the paperwork from my insurance about what they were billing for, I was shocked. Because this was like at a time when no one even knew what kratom was yet. They were billing for kratom testing and quaalude testing. I mean, Seconal, like things that were either so out of style that you couldn't get them anymore, or so obscure that I'd never heard of them on the US recreational drug market. And crucially, they weren't just using this screening immunoglobulin-based tests that most facilities will use, and then if those come up positive, do the more expensive confirmatory gas chromatography mass spectrometry tests. They were using the GCMS from the outset, which means for all of those substances every day for a given patient, they were making several $100s by billing through one of their own facilities for these unnecessary urinalysis tests, which are, again, not they're almost never used every day. Even if you do go out into the community, it's either random, once every few days, or if something happens where a staff member thinks you're impaired, obviously they can always give you a drug test. But I knew something was fishy while I was there. So did everyone else. But to be fair, insurance companies are incredibly stingy about paying for treatment. Even though the medical standard of care says that inpatient treatment should always last at least 30 days, it was at the time extremely common for most insurance companies to only cover 2 to 3 weeks. And the rehabs always have to resubmit all their justification for ongoing treatment. So some of these facilities did these unnecessary urine analysis tests because they needed to do it to fund treatment of adequate length. But what was going on at Palm Partners and a lot of these other facilities like Compass, which is mentioned here, was way beyond that. What was going on was, we're talking about the people at the top of that healthcare pyramid making literally tens of millions of dollars a year from this kind of fraudulent billing. So it went way beyond anything that was justifiable given the difficulties of, again, the private insurance system. Okay, so what I'm going to do is talk about two specific examples of body brokering with screenshots and of text conversations that show it all, unfolding in real time. Now, I got these screenshots from my friend Mike, who years ago started a blog called B for Vendetta. He posted as this guy named Bob, and he used this really cool writing style. It was like half Jigsaw from Saw and half V for Vendetta. It was very spooky. It was very when they knew a treatment provider was doing something shady, they would give him a deadline or her a deadline to confess at the next court date before they made all the information public and sent it to the court. And it was this very sort of engagingly weird, menacing writing style, but it basically was made by Mike and a couple of other collaborators who were working in the South Florida treatment field themselves, and they knew all this shadiness was going on, and these providers were so huge and politically connected and powerful, they were buying, search results or SEO results so that they showed up right at the top of Google as the sponsored results for any treatment related searches, and no one was talking about this other than the addicts who were talking to each other about it. And what I'm getting at is they did a really necessary thing with this blog, and they did it really well and anonymously. So I'm going to link the blog in the description to this video. They also took on a lot of other issues. They took on, the fact that almost no addiction treatment facility will let people use cannabis, even though there are several studies that show that it can be very useful at different levels during different parts of withdrawal from opioids and other substances. They also took on the fact that if you guys were down there during this Florida Shuffle time, you'll know what I'm talking about. But these treatment facilities, they became franchised. And they reminded me a lot of the vibe of those evangelical churches with the mega rich pastors with the weird hair and the private planes. It was that kind of sleazy but shiny shadiness. It was all about when you got clean through those facilities, you were supposed to just thank the people at the top endlessly. Not I got clean through committing myself to treatment, but I got clean because of X person or Y person, and I'm going to work for them, and I'm going to, give my testimonial, my explanation of how I benefited from them for the rest of my life. I'm going to help them get more patients. And they were tied in with relatively, I would say, evangelical or sort of in different ways, informal or progressive Christian churches down south, and it was just this whole vibe. And again, the people at the top were loaded. They were treated like celebrities. They were able to pay sports stars who had become addicted to be their testimonials. And so the B for Vendetta blog also took on that. They took on how many of the people working for these facilities had literally no qualifications other than that maybe they themselves had suffered through addiction. And that can be, connecting with other recovering addicts who have lived through the trenches can be an important part of recovery. I don't think anyone would debate that. But equally important is dealing with treatment professionals who are certified in cognitive behavioral therapy and dialectical behavioral therapy, and who understand different types of trauma response management, and who have the intellectual knowledge, the clinical and textbook knowledge needed to manage complex cases with co-occurring disorders and physical medical problems that play into it and everything else. So the blog took on a lot of related issues. If you're curious, I would encourage you to click on the link in the description and check it out. But I wanted to give credit where credit was due. to. That's where these screenshots come from. And my friend Mike was, gracious enough to send me the documentation for these cases. So without further ado, the first example that I'm going to go into involves this guy named Francisco, who everybody called Frankie. Kind of had like a sleazy New Jersey landlord vibe, like the kind of landlord who you just looked at him and could tell if you were a pretty girl, he would offer you like a discount on your rent if you did a certain kind of favor for him, And I'm just gonna show you these screenshots now. So in this first conversation, the person in blue is an addict who is talking to Frankie, whose messages are in gray. So the addict is saying, yeah, well, they tried pulling stuff on me, so I tried to get kicked out from this other treatment facility by saying I was going to take their clients, and right after that, people ended up coming up to me asking where they could go. Frankie says, oh my God, give me them. Cali. He's saying he can maybe get them treatment out in another state. So the patient says, so I rocked with it and asked to get a number out my phone and took it and dipped. Then the patient says, you still owe me. Now Frankie says, I'll give you a stack each, so $1,000 each once they walk in. And then he says, wait, what? What do I owe you for what? I didn't put you in DOD. So there's a disagreement here about what's owed and what was agreed on previously. So now we're going to another conversation that's related to this incident where the same addict is talking to someone else and things have gone seriously south. This person is now saying, Frankie, who works with Compass, has 4 people up in a hotel right now, brokering them out to Cali. I just got blank person out of it. He still has blank, who is Marchman acted, meaning this person is being legally required to attend treatment. And this person is dipping to Cali too. He also has blank person. Apparently he's fucking blank and blank. Okay, so now this other person responding says, what the heck? If you have the hotel room, maybe you could say he kidnapped and is holding people. Now a subsequent conversation between Frankie and the addict who is involved in all these conversations. Frankie says, yep, I know all, man. The addict says, how did I play you? I ain't got nowhere. And then he said, no, I ain't go nowhere. And Frankie says, you gave me 4. That's 2 plus you. You burnt my other spots. And I gave you the chance and you doubled up, meaning that this addict promised 2 different treatment places that he would send addicts to them and that he would show up himself or herself. Now Frankie says, don't ask me for anything until you make this right. The facility was waiting and the girl told them what was going on. Now the addict responds, you either let me try to fix my stuff or not. And Frankie says, fix it. He says, I don't care. He's saying, I even vouched for you and got my guy to give you another chance to make bread. So this is how blatant this kind of fraud was. And the huge problem with these body brokers is that they weren't legally attached to certain facilities. Okay, so they had working relationships usually with multiple facilities, and they're third party. So these aren't people who are, credentialed alcohol and substance abuse counselors. They're not licensed or accredited in any way. So if they lie to you, they get you on a plane and you show up and they have double promised a treatment spot and you have nowhere to go, there's no one you can complain to. And crucially, you can't even sue the facility because the facility isn't technically legally related to this body broker that they're using. And the body broker's an individual with usually no professional insurance whose pockets are way too shallow for any attorney to want to wage a lawsuit, for it to be worth it for them to file a lawsuit against the body broker. So it was a really messed up situation where the body brokers, again, tended to be very savvy, oftentimes themselves recovering or even actively addicted people who could tell addicts who were trying to get into treatment exactly what they wanted to hear. If they wanted money for going to treatment because they didn't want to get clean, okay, they would tell them that. If they wanted to hear it was going to be painless and that they'd be in a really bougie facility with a lot of sort of extra benefits, they would hear that. Like some of these people were so smooth, they were almost like psychic in reading people, And this example I chose because it's again, it's also blatant. And again, that Compass facility that I mentioned at the beginning of this video and that was mentioned in these screenshots again now. This facility was, I remember reading through the B for Vendetta blog that one day it was shot up. Someone actually fired at the entry area. I don't know the details of why that happened. My suspicion is that it was some rival facility paying an active addict a certain amount to shoot without hurting anyone, so that Compass would get shut down, their detox would get shut down for a day or two at least, and the people who were supposed to be going there would get, shuttled into this other facility, this other franchise. So that's my suspicion. The other thing that might have happened is that someone didn't get what they were promised or felt that they were promised in terms of a kickback, and because of that, they were angry enough that they went and took a pot shot at the facility that they were treated at. So I mention that because very often, you hear the kidnapping context of that second screenshot, and these kind of body brokering situations, all the incentives were in the wrong directions. And because of that, oftentimes these situations that might not seem that bad escalated to much more violent or dangerous situations, especially for the vulnerable addicts involved. All right, so the second set of screenshots involves a different body broker whose comments are in gray, talking with an addict who is relapsed, but who is also working in a treatment center in South Florida at the time. So the body broker says, "Find me a detox client, LOL." She says, I got you. People relapse here a lot. I know a lot of people down here for being in treatment, so much. Break me off a little. So this guy says, word. Okay. He says, sucks you got a boyfriend, but if you keep doing good, I'll help you find a job, whatever. And if you help me, I'll help you. She says, bet, thank you, and I will. I'm waiting to hear back from my girl. I just seen she said she's looking for a new halfway, so I'm guessing she relapsed. If she did, I'll send her to you. He says, the body broker, says, word, thank you. You'll be my hero if you can help me. So a couple weeks later, he sends her a bunch of eyeball emojis. And the girl says, if me and 2 other people came for detox, how much could you break me off? The body broker says, depends on who the other 2 people are and if they got good policies or not. She responds saying, yep, they both got insurance. He says, when are y'all looking to come? She says, whenever. And he says, how much were you expecting? She says, we were talking to someone out in Cali earlier, but they can't do it for a while. How long would we need to stay? And he starts saying Cali is a way different breed. He said, you'll have to stay at least for detox, 7 to 8 days. And they are going on sort of confirming what she and these other addicts will get if they show up for detox and possibly treatment after that. Now, I use this example because, and I didn't include several other screenshots of just dozens of messages where this guy is mentioning that it's unfortunate that this girl has a boyfriend and how's their relationship, is it solid or not, and just sort of through very obvious implication saying that if she will get with him, her situation is she's gonna be better off. He's gonna look out for her, and they can both prosper through this treatment fraud. So this is a level of stuff that I'm talking about. Okay, it's not subtle, it wasn't rare, and people got totally screwed because these body brokers lied to them. They got them on a plane. Almost everyone at these treatment facilities, 85 to 95%, came from out of state. So they were broke addicts, again, usually on their parents' insurance. They would get a one-way plane ticket to show up in Florida. They were supposed to get picked up from the airport and taken to the treatment facility that they would be admitted into. I know cases where people were literally left on the side of the road. It was unbelievable. This was the wild west of treatment, and everybody was trying to get as many patients in as possible at all times. So again, there was a lot of double booking for a single detox or residential treatment spot. Because of that, people got completely shut out. A lot of these Florida Shuffle patients ended up chronically homeless. They would essentially only have a safe place to stay when they were in treatment, either residential inpatient treatment or a halfway house or sober living or 3/4 house. So this was a mess. It happened in Florida, not by coincidence, but because Florida is one of the most medically deregulated states in the union. It is one of only a few states that doesn't require doctors to carry malpractice insurance, and in every way, it is weak in terms of taking action against doctors and other treatment providers who are doing the wrong thing. So there's also a huge problem with this these days out in California. There's a California shuffle going on to this day, and that has to do with California Medicaid providing pretty robust reimbursement for treatment services. So this stuff, this body brokering, skirts the line of legal and illegal in most states and according to our federal statutes in the U.S., according to my non-expert understanding. So because all of this stuff, including the cash kickbacks, always illegal. Even plane tickets, because that money ultimately comes from insurance companies being billed for addiction treatment and it's not meant to fund transportation, even that kind of benefit is typically able to be prosecuted as a kind of fraud eventually. But, it takes years of the prosecutors getting all the, the sort of data gathered and doing the kind of surveillance that they need to build and prosecute a strong case. So in my opinion, we need national legislation that just totally makes it illegal for facilities to use third-party, unlicensed, unaccredited body brokers. I think that anyone in that kind of role should have to carry insurance and to be certified in some way so that there's some standardization. But we need something on the front end rather than our legal system having to take care of mopping the mess up haphazardly years after in only a few cases out of the many, many, many treatment providers that are engaged in this kind of malpractice. So the final thing that I want to talk about today is just like, how can you protect yourself as an addict looking into treatment, or as the loved one of an addict helping them get into treatment? I know, believe me, when you see someone dying of addiction, you often for months or even years are holding your breath, waiting to get the call saying that they finally accepted that they need to go to inpatient treatment and that there's a facility willing to take them. Inpatient treatment in the US costs tens of thousands of dollars for a 30-day stay, not even including the detox period before that when more medical monitoring is required, and the time after that when you might be staying in a sober living or halfway house. So just for the inpatient days for 30 days or whatever period you're being residentially treated, that's tens of thousands of dollars. Almost no one pays for that out of pocket for that reason, and people go into serious debt to do this. So when you finally get that call that, like, okay, they're going into treatment, it is such a weight off the shoulders of every person, every parent or sibling or spouse of someone who's badly addicted to know that they're going to treatment that day. And it is such a sick farce that these treatment providers are facilitating when they engage in these unethical practices through which people end up caught in the shuffle of never-ending ineffective treatment, and basically they become sort of, again, chronically in and out of treatment services, often stuck out of state with no way to get home. So it is a really sick and significant kind of wrongdoing that went on for way too long at way too high of a level, partly because of how effective these treatment centers were at lobbying against any kind of regulation that would hold them accountable for using third-party body brokers. So this is the thing. When you're talking to someone who tells you that they might be able to get you into multiple treatment facilities, be cautious of that from the outset, okay? Ask them specifically, are you associated with this treatment facility? Do you have any license or accreditation? For example, like, are you a credentialed alcohol and substance abuse counselor? Because in that case, there's somewhere for you to go if they completely lie and screw you over, and make sure you get enough contact information for them so that you can hold them accountable later on if something bad happens, okay? So first ask about that. Are they employed by a facility, or are they a third-party broker? Don't ever trust anyone who is offering you plane tickets to come to a treatment facility. That is, again, usually illegal, if not always illegal, and it gives them incredible leverage once you show up, because they know that you're not going to be okay with being thrown out on the street, which is what they can do to you. So unless you are 100% sure that you are so financially secure that it will be no problem for you to get back to wherever home is and set up in a safe living situation if you get suddenly discharged, I would not ever accept a plane ticket from a facility. And even if you have that buffer, I still wouldn't, because again, ethical facilities aren't offering these kinds of kickbacks. It opens them up to litigation and to potential prosecution that an ethical facility that's on the up and up will not want to risk, okay? Now, if you're aware of body brokers operating in your area or wherever you're thinking of going to treatment, get screenshots like the ones that I showed today and send them with some concise context to your state's addiction treatment regulator. So, for example, in New York State, we have a group called OASIS, Office of Addiction, and I think it's Office of Addiction and Substance Abuse Services, or Office of Supports for Addiction and Substance Abuse Services. I forget the acronym, but it's OASIS in New York State, and they are pretty good. They have a 24-hour helpline that you can call to make a complaint if you're in treatment and you feel you're being abused or coerced. They will absolutely investigate every claim. You're protected against retaliation, and in my experience in New York State, OASIS is pretty active. Now, in many states, there is not any comparable group that operates with any level of efficacy, so we're lucky in New York State. But even if you don't have a group like OASIS in your state, you have your state attorney general's office. They can be a very powerful ally. So the number one thing is document. Find out who your state's addiction treatment regulator is, and consider contacting the attorney general in your state if it is egregious enough and you have a high enough amount of evidence to establish what's going on. Okay? If you're not sure who to contact, leave a comment here, or use the email address in my YouTube channel description. You can send your evidence to me, and I will help you figure out who we could get in touch with, who might be able to help you understand what options for recourse are available. Finally, if you believe you were abused or coerced or treated unethically at a treatment facility, but it doesn't necessarily rise to the level of unethical or illegal abuse, go online and leave a detailed negative review anywhere you can possibly put it. Include the staff names, the dates, specific incidents, and any other useful information, and keep it short and succinct and as objective sounding as possible. Again, if you need help with that, I will help you with that. You want to be detailed without writing a novel, and you want to include the kind of details, again, like staff names and dates and specific locations that give credibility to what you're saying, because these facilities know that as addicts, we are some of the most, justifiably not believed and vulnerable people in the entire world. So we are not viewed as credible, and because of that, we need to be very careful to document and to think about who else can corroborate the kinds of things that we are going to be bringing to light. But it is possible. These shady addiction treatment providers are often busted eventually, and nationwide, this problem is finally being cracked down on. So it's recognized, and there is a reckoning, that's unfolding at the moment. So I have so much more that I could say about this topic, but I'm trying to keep my videos at a length that means that more people are likely to watch them. So if you have any questions, again, if you need help finding out who to get in touch with to report a certain kind of abuse or unethical practice, just hit me up in the comments or by email. Other than that, I love you guys. I appreciate so much the core group of you who tune in for all my videos. I can't tell you what that means to me. And if I don't hear from you in the interim, I will catch you at the next video. So thanks again, guys, and I hope you enjoy your Thanksgiving weekend.